Hi everyone, welcome to this Cloud Native podcast series. I'm your host Abzal Ansari. In this episode, as the title suggests, we are gonna discuss observability with Jaeger. This is again like graduated CNC project. Those who don't know, for more details, you can definitely check out their official docs and open source project. Also linked in this description below. So let's start. Let's welcome our guest on the stage. And yeah, so John, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, I would love to. Thanks for having me on the podcast and appreciate you putting this together for the community. My name's Jonah Cowell, and among other things, I am one of the maintainers of Jaeger, but I also work on several other open source projects, namely OpenSearch, and I also work on OpenTelemetry and a little bit on Thanos as well. My day job, I typically run product. I'm in between jobs right now, but I'm going to be starting somewhere soon. So I tend to work in product management or running engineering. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much. I think I'm very excited to have this discussion around this possibility and especially with Egger. So, you told about your short journey, and could you keep your journey towards observability, like how you found this your observability kind of
Yeah,
thing and discuss.
yeah, definitely. So I would say when I was much younger, you're talking about probably about 20 plus years ago, I started working generally in what you would call operations. Today, it's more DevOps and SRE. And I always like dealing with complex systems and dealing with a lot of challenging scale problems. So at that point in my career, aside from needing monitoring to make sure things are working, when you had problems, you needed the tools to be able to dig into the problem and really understand it and fix it. And that's really when I started getting interested in observability from a technical perspective. But over time, I started to become very interested in monitoring and observing the business. So, how do you tie business metrics to technical metrics? And these were things that I was working on over 20 years ago. Um, I then made a career shift personally, and I moved to being an analyst at Gartner. And what Gartner does is we write research and we advise users and vendors that are building technology and people investing in technology of what to be aware of and how to make decisions. So I did the research and ran inside observability and also other kinds of infrastructure management at Gartner for 4 years. And then I moved into the vendor space building tools. So I ran product at App Dynamics, which is an APM observability company. Cisco acquired us. I stayed for a couple of years after that at Cisco. And then I was the CTO at Kentic, which is a network observability vendor. And then after that, CTO at Logs.io, which is an observability vendor. And most recently, I ran product at Ivan, which does data platforms, some observability, but a lot of databases and data streaming. So that's what I'm up to now, and that's kind of how I got here. But I've always been super interested in understanding systems, and observability really lets you do that. So
Awesome kind of journey you mentioned, starting from your 20-year back from then. I think most interesting is that when you doing things around your process of your let's say software project, something you really want to do, and for your let's say for your business or market, as per the market standards. So that really sometimes makes you challenge, makes it hard for your to do things like How do you 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 know uh, tackle the challenges in your journey? Let's anything you remember in your journey, if there is any challenge you faced.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different challenges and different things that I've run into. It's hard to really call one out, but I would say that my advice is to be curious and to speak to a lot of people and learn as much as you can. Thankfully, we have these great communities and open source ecosystems that we can use to learn. And now it's much easier to contribute to projects. And even if you aren't a developer, we need help with documentation. We need help with lots of things, and you can get involved in these projects, which is a great way to learn. And then that'll help you solve problems. But personally, I've run into a lot of challenges, definitely, and solved them. With technology or with working with other people.
Yeah, good. Like these are things like we should keep in our mind. We do a lot of hacks in open source projects, so these challenges comes in our anytime, like daily or maybe sometime at the point of your life, like doing these things. So let's now specifically dive into Agile. So yes, so how does Agile comes into the picture when you are talking about observability,
Yeah.
like you can, yeah.
Yeah, so when you kind of look at the history of the market, a lot of the technologies out there, when you talk about understanding an application and going deep, used to be very expensive and sophisticated, like the things that we built at App Dynamics. And these technologies were not accessible to everyone. So some of the large companies that were coming up, in the last 10 years or so, decided that they needed to build their own tools to handle the scale that they were operating at. So, in the case of Jaeger, Uber decided that they needed to build their own tool to do this. They wanted to create a very lightweight way of collecting observability data. And they created Jaeger internally as a tool just for them to use. And over time, Uber decided to open source the technology and make it available to everyone. And over time, as Kubernetes grew, it became part of um, it became part of the CNCF ecosystem pretty early on. At the same time, Jaeger was being built. There was also changes happening in the data collection, the instrumentation. So Jaeger had its own libraries, which implemented open tracing API standards. But there were also a lot of other projects going on. So,
Yeah, that's kind of Agile taking over instrumentation and making it open source.
yep.
So yeah, I think if you want to talk about like story of Uber, you just mentioned, I think.
Yeah,
So
sure.
yeah, I just
And
want to tell
let me just
what.
add one piece. So when you look at the problem that they were solving, because Uber and a lot of these companies were building highly distributed microservices architectures, they started to run into performance challenges because each of these services is managed by a different small team. So the challenge that you run into is when the customer is having a problem, where is the problem happening and which team can fix the problem. So the reason that they built their own tracing system, which was very lightweight, was to help them find and pinpoint where the problem is, but more importantly, to help that team that owns the problem fix the problem. One of the most important things with the change that we went through towards DevOps is about accountability and ownership. And the development team that builds that part of the application, they own the whole life cycle of that part of the application. They build it, they run it in production, they debug it. So the accountability is with that team, and you need to give them the right tools to be able to solve the problem, which is why distributed tracing is so important. And that's what Jaeger was built to solve, that specific problem.
Yeah, I think that's where Hacker comes into this picture. Yeah, I think overall, it is great. Getting into like how Hacker, everything, open source project and all. So definitely we should look into docs for more details. And I think if you can also give light, explanation on like constructs of Hacker
Sure.
and how it stores the traces and all.
Yeah. So the current state of the project is that Jaeger is really two main pieces. Jaeger is a storage format and a storage system for distributed tracing data and the visualization of that data. So the way that this fits together is that you, as a developer or an application owner, instrument your application with OpenTelemetry, which is a separate project in the CNCF. And that data then comes into Jaeger, which stores it in a database. And we support officially Elasticsearch, OpenSearch, Cassandra, and soon we'll officially support ClickHouse. We unofficially support many different data stores that you can use. So that data goes into the data store of your choice. And then Jaeger provides a user interface to be able to search and visualize the traces that are happening and let your teams solve problems with the application. So those are kind of the big pieces of Jaeger and what it does.
Yeah, great. Also, like I wanted to know, like traces, matrix, and those like logs and all. So you can achieve like from your own application running into a container or something in your cluster, deploying into cluster. So here we are looking for visualization, right? So if you are using OpenTelemetry and I mean for this kind of application and for instrumentation and all, then we can skip Agar and use any other tool that would like give the visualization. For example, Grafana and other kind of monitoring tools, right? So, what do you think about it?
So Jaeger specifically is focused on tracing. We do a little bit on metrics. Grafana is very focused on metrics, and they do a little bit on logging and tracing, but it's generally a metric tool, and that's primarily what Grafana is used for. Although you can do other things, it's not. You always start with a metric in Grafana. In Jaeger, we've designed it to basically allow you to explore and search for traces in an open way. So it lets you explore all the traces, drill down into what you want to see, and analyze it. So in Jaeger, you start with a trace, and it's always about a trace. Similarly, there are great log management tools that allow you to start with a log and explore logs. Like OpenSearch is a good open source example that really focuses on log analytics. Yes, it can look at traces and metrics, but that's not really what it's best at doing. And Grafana is best at looking at metrics. And so that's kind of the de facto UI for Prometheus, is everyone uses Grafana for the most part. For traces, the de facto UI in the open source ecosystem tends to be Jaeger. And that's what people use when they're starting to learn about traces or implementing tracing within their organization.
Yeah, nice. Like, it's like sometime hard time to debug, like when you don't have like right tool at your at the right place. So that's why developers have their own kind of debugging tool and monitoring tools to
Yeah.
do this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And
that's always kind of the downside of open source is that you have to deal with a lot of different pieces. So if you want to spend money, you can go to a vendor that makes that much easier, but you have to spend the money on it. And if you're an organization that's scaling very large, like for example, Uber was, they decided since there's no open source to deal with this problem, we're going to build our own. And many organizations do the same thing, whether it's Meta or Google. They've built their own tooling to do this stuff because their scale is so large. But that's not, most companies don't have that level of scale, and you can solve it with open source tools quite easily, but it's not always the best user experience.
yeah, actually, this depends on the user experience and a specification of the customer's requirement. So, like we mentioned about like open telemetry, like how this is like involving in this area. So, could you light on like how does it leverage OTL and how like OTL collector like comes into this picture and how this makes the process easy for this Agar visualization. And also you can talk about like how OTL become like standardized for this.
Yeah. Yeah. So over time, the instrumentation that Uber built, which was part of Jaeger, was replaced as OpenTelemetry became more mature. So now OpenTelemetry does all data collection for Jaeger. And it makes it easy because it supports many, many languages, and it supports both manual instrumentation using an SDK or an API, and also auto instrumentation, which allows you to not change your code and still get tracing data. So with open telemetry, you have a lot of choice and a lot of options. We have a component inside Jaeger today called the Jaeger collector, and we're currently working on a big project in Jaeger, which we call Jaeger V2 or version 2. And our goal in this project is to actually take the open telemetry collector and move it inside Jaeger and replace the Jaeger collector. So this will mean that we have even more common code and common architecture with open telemetry. And ultimately, it makes it easier for users because the same collector that you use today will be used as part of Jaeger. And that's the goal with the project. We hope to have that in beta for the next KubeCon in the US. So that's around November. We'll have a beta release, hopefully, if everything goes well over the next few months. And then it'll become generally available next year. So that's kind of our big project and how we're further making Jaeger and open telemetry closer together.
Yeah, I hope like it goes well
Yeah,
and also comes into this make it into KubeCon US. So like if you are also like to give insights on SPM
sure.
and yeah.
So the reason that we built SPM, which is service performance monitoring, is because when you look at the APM or application performance monitoring tools, they incorporate monitoring of applications and not just looking at tracing. So Jaeger used to only look at traces, so it was more of a debugging or diagnostic tool. And we wanted to make it more useful operationally. So the Jaeger team decided that in order to do that, we had to create something in open telemetry that would allow us to convert a trace into a metric. And so, why this is important is because if I'm monitoring my application, I want to understand when the errors start going up, that's a problem. The latency, the response time starts going up, that's a problem. Or maybe the volume of my requests goes up really fast. There's maybe someone attacking us, or there's something like that that's causing a huge traffic spike. So we created a component in OpenTelemetry that's now called the span metrics connector. And what that does is it takes the spans from the tracing data and creates metrics. And those are stored in the metric system of your choice. So like Prometheus is obviously the popular one. Within the Jaeger UI, we can visualize those metrics and give you an idea of how your application is operating. And so this allows us to do a little bit of monitoring and not just looking at tracing. So we really built that to enable people to start to understand the operational status of their applications. And you can obviously take those same metrics, visualize them in Grafana, build alerting. There's lots of use cases for that data. So that's why we built that, is because we wanted to move Jaeger from just being a debugging tool into also helping with monitoring. So it was a project that we built over the course of a year and a half, probably, because we had to implement it in multiple places and projects. But I think it's something that a lot of people use for many use cases now. That's a very popular part of OpenTelemetry now, and it's available for anyone to use. So that's kind of the story behind SPM, or service performance monitoring.
That's nice. Like I just came to know about the whole point about the SPM. So now I think you mentioned about the Prometheus, the matrix system behind this, which is collecting. I mean, which is responsible for showing the metrics, I believe, and then it is also working with the Jaeger side by side. Is it kind of this kind of happening, or I missed something where?
Uh, well, we built. You're talking about SPM specifically.
Yeah, right. Actually, Prometheus and kind of Agar, how these both are doing.
So inside the UI of Jaeger, we query Prometheus to get the metrics. So we don't store the metrics in Jaeger because metrics are better stored in a time series database like
Yeah,
Prometheus. So we just query Prometheus or any PromQL compatible data store. It doesn't have to be Prometheus. It can be Thanos. It can be Cortex. It could be a vendor that supports Prometheus like AWS or Google or Microsoft. So it supports any Prometheus compatible data store.
great. Yeah, just I found this kind of thing in the Slack channel also.
Yeah.
So you talked about like the Prometheus compatible system. I think uh, could you also say like this is related to something we can do with Datadog service and which also provide this.
Someone would need to do some work to make that happen because Datadog does not support Prometheus query language. So you have to use a different language. It's like speaking SQL versus something else, different language. So PromQL is a query language, which is what we've written that component in. If you wanted to support a different query language, you would have to adapt that piece of the code, basically.
I see. Yeah, that's why we are looking for a competitive system here. So I just wanted to know like here again like to scale a lot of applications and not, you need multiple open telemetry
Sure.
collectors.
Yeah.
So how do we scale it and how to configure the OTL collector?
Yeah. So when you're scaling open telemetry, it can be a little bit challenging. It's quite easy to do if you're not doing any level of sampling. And sampling, you could do a whole episode on just this topic because it can be quite complex. But based on the way that you're doing sampling, you have to scale your collectors in different ways. And the reason why that matters is for a few, broad reasons. Um, the main reason of why that matters is because you still need to deal with the fact that you may be storing additional span data in the collector. If you do that, your collectors will need more instances because of the memory consumption and the CPU consumption. You also potentially need to do different types of load balancing between collectors so that traces that are related to each other go to a single collector. So there are quite a few different aspects of scaling OpenTelemetry collectors where sometimes you actually need multiple layers of scaled out collectors depending on what you're doing. This is a whole topic unto itself, just because of the nature of the complexity that can be involved with the collector itself. So um, you do need multiple collectors. You have to think about sampling and you have to think about load balancing. Those are kind of the most important things when you're scaling collectors out with OpenTelemetry.
Yeah, that sounds good. Like, we have to take care about like the new kind of system. Like now, this will give you more challenges, like load balancing and kind of these things for
Yeah,
networking purpose.
sure.
So yeah, I think we can now like discuss like how to get involved. I think you mentioned about this
Yeah.
in the first. Any community call? Do we have any mentorship program?
Yes, I will go over a few things. We have a Slack channel on the CNCF. Anyone can come in there, ask questions. We have lots of people that ask, "Hey, I want to contribute. How can I get started?" So we answer all of those questions. We have our repository on GitHub. You can open an issue if you have a question. We always answer quickly. We also have a lot of issues in GitHub that are tagged good first issue. It's a good way to get started if you're a developer. We have a community call. I want to say it's once a month. It's on the CNCF calendar. We just had it about an hour ago. But that is monthly. We have that call where anyone can join to ask questions or hear what's going on with the project. Um, we also have mentorships running. So we've been doing those pretty regularly. We do them with Google Summer of Code, and we do the LFX, the Linux Foundation mentorship program. So if you're interested in contributing and you're maybe early in your career, when you use those programs, you actually get paid for your time. It's usually about a 3 month timeline or 4 months for those mentorships that we do. And you can work with the team and help contribute to the project. So those are probably the ones I can think of. And then if you're at a KubeCon and we have a booth, which we often do, come by, talk to the maintainers, check out what's going on with Jaeger. Yeah, we're always kind of trying to make things better and improve the project. So appreciate any help, definitely.
Yeah, great. Like, I just want to add my experience as well. Like, when I was trying to contribute this project, and I was like quite new to this project when I was like, finding, so looking for mentorship program, and that's where I'll just jumped into this, like um, understanding the whole thing about this Jaeger project.
Mm-hmm.
So I think everyone, those who are looking for, I mean, for their kind of mentorship and involvement in this community, definitely they should join and try to do something before coming to, I mean, join or applying for mentorship, because if you have kind of skills that you want to showcase for your application, if you want to apply for, then that will definitely give you more chances to get shortlisted further. So thank you so much again, John. I'm enjoying it with me, and for this community I'm doing for this local chapter. As I mentioned, we have this holy chapter in India, so definitely we will collaborate again soon in the future. And thank you so much. So,
Thank you for having me.
yeah. So see you again, and okay then.